Santa doesn't love me anymore. A billionaire hears this and turns her Christmas into a fairy tale. It was the first snow of December when Jackson Reed pulled his black Escalade into the narrow side street where Carter Elementary still stood. Red brick old playground and all. From the warmth of his luxury SUV, the building looked almost too small to have shaped the man he became. He was 42 now, CEO of a boutique hotel empire, known for polished speeches, high-rise rooftops, and cold negotiations. But today he wasn't here for headlines. He grabbed a plain envelope from the passenger seat. Inside was a cashier's check, 7 figures, made out to the school that once gave him his first book, his first lunch ticket, and the only adult who ever said, "I believe in you." Jackson didn't want a ribbon cutting or a plaque. He just wanted to hand it to the principal and leave unnoticed. He walked into the school office, nodded politely at the secretary, and sat in a hard plastic chair that still smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons. Then, something happened. As he exited the building a few minutes later, Jackson noticed a little girl sitting alone on the cold stone steps. She was tiny, no more than 4, with tangled auburn hair and a puffy purple coat that swallowed her small frame. Her legs swung back and forth. Her eyes were red. She looked abandoned. He hesitated. Something about her pulled him in. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently. The girl looked up at him and without hesitation whispered, "I didn't get a Christmas present." Jackson blinked. "What?" "I didn't get any present. Not even one." That was the moment, the words that cut through his tailored suit and slammed into a long buried place inside his chest. This wasn't in his plans. He came to drop off a donation and walk away. But standing in front of this girl, snow settling into her coat hood and sadness wrapped around her like a second skin, Jackson realized he wasn't walking away from this. Not today. Not ever. Jackson slowly sat beside her on the cold concrete steps, brushing snowflakes from his coat as he tried to find the right words. But none came. Not right away. The little girl didn't even seem to notice the silence. She kept her eyes on the slushy ground, her voice soft and raw, like she'd been waiting days to let it out. "Mommy said Santa might come late this year," she mumbled, but he didn't come at all. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily." "Hi, Lily, I'm Jackson." She nodded without looking up, then added, "Daddy lost his job last month. We had noodles for Christmas dinner, just noodles with butter." Her tiny hands fidgeted in her lap. Mom lit a candle, though, said it was special. Jackson didn't interrupt. He couldn't. He'd never heard a child talk like this, with quiet sorrow, but no bitterness like she'd already learned to expect less. "All my friends at preschool brought new toys for show and tell this week," Lily added. "Maddie got a doll that talks. Trevor got a robot car. I said I got something too, but..." Her voice cracked. They knew I was lying. Jackson clenched his jaw. A part of him, the part built for boardrooms and acquisitions, wanted to fix it right then and there, pull out his wallet and buy every toy in the city. But another part, the quieter part, just wanted to sit with her, to let her feel seen. "Lily," he asked softly, "do you really believe Santa only brings gifts to rich kids?" She finally turned to him. Her eyes were ocean blue and wide. "I was good," she whispered. "I helped Mommy with dishes. I didn't cry when we had no heat. I even said thank you for the noodles." Jackson's throat tightened. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that life wasn't fair? Not because she wasn't good, but because the world sometimes forgot the ones who needed remembering most. Before he could answer, a soft voice called from the doorway. "Lily." A young woman stepped out, tired but kind-eyed, wrapped in a worn coat. "I'm sorry," she told Jackson with a small smile. "She loves to talk to strangers. We just finished her conference." Jackson stood. "It's no trouble. She's very special." Lily stood up too still, holding his gaze. "Thanks for listening," she said. "Nobody does that when I talk about Christmas stuff." Her mother reached for her hand and they walked down the snowy sidewalk. Jackson remained seated, watching them disappear around the corner. He had come to give a check. Instead, he'd been handed something far more powerful, the raw truth of a child's unmet hope, and it was going to haunt him. Jackson didn't drive off right away. Instead, he sat in his car with the engine running, the heater humming quietly, his hands resting on the steering wheel, unmoving. Lily's voice echoed in his mind like a song on repeat. "I said, thank you for the noodles. I didn't cry when we had no heat. Nobody listens when I talk about Christmas stuff. He stared out the windshield at the empty schoolyard as the snowfall thickened. The playground, bright and new, sat under a thin white blanket. But in Jackson's mind, it wasn't the present he saw. It was the past. His past. He remembered a boy with shoes too tight, standing by the same rusted monkey bars, hoping no one would notice the patch in his jeans. He remembered being 7, waking up on Christmas morning, running downstairs with a full heart, only to find a single gift under the tree, a small plastic fire truck. The wheels didn't even turn right. His mom had knelt beside him, her smile stretched thin. "Do you like it, baby?" she'd asked, nervous, hopeful. And he'd said, "It's perfect, Mom." But even then, he'd seen the tears in her eyes. Jackson leaned back in his leather seat and stared at the ceiling of the car. Back then, his father had worked double shifts at the refinery. They barely made rent. His mother used to make cookies with just flour and water and whatever sugar packets she could take from the diner. And still, she'd put on a show. Still, she made magic where there was none. But he remembered the silence after dinner. The way she'd turn the radio on just to fill the void. The way the grown-ups whispered about bills and cutbacks thinking he couldn't hear. He'd grown up believing you had to become rich to be happy. That money could shield you from cold kitchens and dry Christmas trees. And now, he met a girl who had no presence, no heat, but was trying just as hard to smile through it, just like his mom once had. Lily didn't need a check. She didn't need a speech. She needed to know the world hadn't forgotten her. Jackson's fingers slowly reached for the glove box. Inside was a small photo album he kept hidden away. Not because of shame, but because the memories were too sharp. He flipped through it. There he was, gap-toothed and grinning with that same old fire truck in his lap. Next to him, his mom, young, radiant, tired. He closed the album gently and exhaled. For years he'd tried to outrun that kid. The poor kid in thrift store sweaters. The boy who hated Christmas because it made him feel less than. But now maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to remember. Because Lily didn't just remind him of his past. She was his past. And he wasn't going to let her grow up feeling forgotten the way he once did. Not if he could help it. That night, Jackson lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of his luxury home. The kind of silence people envy from the outside. But inside it was suffocating. He tried reading. He tried answering emails. He even turned on the news hoping the droning voices would lull him into distraction. Nothing worked, because no matter what he did, he couldn't stop seeing her face. Lily's wide, hopeful eyes staring up at him on the school steps. That small voice saying Santa didn't come. He'd built a life out of solving problems, underperforming properties, delayed permits, broken negotiations. But this was different. This wasn't a transaction. This was personal. It was as if a 4-year-old had reached into his chest and pulled something loose. He got up and paced his room, the soft carpet muffling his steps. He could send money, toys, gifts for her entire class. But somehow he knew that wasn't enough. Not for Lily. She hadn't asked for anything. She had simply told the truth. And that truth, that brutal, innocent truth, deserved more than a Band-Aid. Jackson stopped in front of a mirror. The man looking back at him wore a silk robe and held a glass of untouched scotch. But behind his eyes, something stirred. A part of himself that had been buried under layers of success and detachment. "Do you think Santa only gives presents to rich kids?" she had asked. He didn't even answer her then. He hadn't known how. But he knew what he needed to do now. He tossed the scotch down the sink, grabbed a hoodie from his closet, and headed to his office. There on the far shelf was an old wooden box. Inside it were sketches, photos, and forgotten trinkets. Memories from a time when dreams came without dollar signs. At the bottom was a faded Christmas card his mom had once made by hand. It read, "The best gifts don't come from stores. They come from people who care." Jackson held it for a long time. Then he opened his laptop. He didn't look at the stock market. He didn't check bookings. He typed one word into the search bar: handmade dolls. Something unique. Something that looked like her. Not a shiny box from a mega store. Not something expensive for the sake of being expensive. Something that told Lily she mattered. That someone, somewhere, remembered her when it counted. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when Jackson finally clicked confirm order. Das Dom de Omursi Smelde. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted but clear-minded for the first time in days. He didn't know what would happen next. He just knew this Lily would know she hadn't been forgotten. Not this time. Not ever again. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Jackson pulled into the quiet downtown street. Shops were still opening, and the sidewalks glistened with the thin sheen of morning frost. His eyes scanned the storefronts until he spotted it. A quaint little place with a hand-painted sign, Nora's Handcrafted Wonders. Unlike the chain toy stores he'd passed earlier, this one had warmth just in the display alone. A patchwork quilt hung in the window, surrounded by rows of hand-carved animals and fabric dolls that looked like they had stories of their own. He stepped inside, and a tiny bell jingled above the door. The shop smelled like cedarwood and cinnamon. Gentle folk music played in the background. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver curls tucked into a loose braid and spectacles perched on the bridge of her nose. "Good morning," she said, voice like warm tea. "Looking for something special?" Jackson nodded. "I need a doll," he said, "but not just any doll. It has to be perfect." The woman's eyes twinkled. "Tell me about the child," she said, walking out from behind the counter and leading him toward the back shelves. "She's 4, he began. Red hair, big blue eyes, smart, kind, brave. Her family's going through some hard times." The woman paused, her fingers grazing the shelf before gently lifting a doll. It had soft auburn yarn hair tied with tiny purple bows and deep embroidered eyes that somehow seemed to glow with personality. She wore a lilac dress with tiny flowers stitched into the hem. Jackson's breath caught. "That's her." The shopkeeper smiled. "She was stitched with love. Took me 3 days. I thought she was waiting for someone." "Could you add a name?" he asked. "Lily," in gold thread right across the dress. "Of course," she said. "It'll take about an hour." Jackson sat at the corner table, sipping herbal tea while the woman worked with quiet concentration. He watched her hands, nimble and deliberate, guiding the golden thread into elegant loops. Lily. It struck him how something so small, so intimate could carry so much meaning. When she finished, she carefully wrapped the doll in soft tissue and tucked it inside a pink box with silver stars. "She's ready," she said with a satisfied nod. "Give this to Lily for me. Tell her. She's not alone." Jackson swallowed the lump in his throat. "I will." As he stepped outside with the box cradled gently in his arms, the winter wind rushed against his cheeks. But for the first time in days, he felt warm. This wasn't just a gift. It was a promise. A symbol that someone in the world saw Lily, not as a statistic, not as a charity case, but as a girl who deserved something special. Tomorrow he would return to that school, and when he did, Lily would finally get the gift she never dared to expect. Jackson arrived at Carter Elementary just before recess. The air was crisp sunlight bouncing off the fresh powder that blanketed the school grounds. Children poured into the yard, chasing each other, tossing snowballs, their laughter bouncing off brick walls. But on the same wooden bench near the swings, right where he'd last seen her, sat Lily, alone, still hugging her knees, still watching from a distance. Jackson took a breath, then approached slowly the pastel box tucked securely under his arm like it held something sacred. When Lily spotted him, her eyes lit up in instant recognition. "Jackson. You came back," she said, scrambling upright, her boots crunching in the snow. He smiled. "Of course I did. I thought maybe you forgot." "Never," he said. Then he knelt so they were eye level and gently placed the box between them. "Actually, I came because I have something really important to give you." Lily's eyes widened as they settled on the ribboned package. "For me?" He nodded. "It's kind of a funny story," he said, voice soft and warm. "See, last night I got a visit. From someone very special." Lily tilted her head. "Who?" "Santa Claus." Her jaw dropped. "The real one." Jackson nodded seriously. "He showed up at my house, said he made a terrible mistake, said he'd forgotten to deliver something to a very special little girl. He asked me, to fix it for him. Said her name was Lily, with red hair, blue eyes, and the kindest heart in town." Lily looked down at the box like it might disappear if she blinked. "You think it's really for me?" she whispered. "What if it's for another Lily?" Jackson smiled. He was very specific. "This is for you, Lily, no doubt about it." With trembling fingers, she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Her breath caught. Inside lay the doll, The one with the same auburn yarn hair, same bright eyes, wearing a lilac dress trimmed with golden thread. And across the front, stitched in glittering letters, was her name, Lily. She reached in slowly, hands gentle as if touching something sacred. "She looks like me," she whispered. Then she hugged the doll to her chest so tightly Jackson thought the air might leave it. "Santa said he wanted to make sure you knew he didn't forget you," Jackson said softly. "He told me you were brave, and that you deserve something truly special." Lily sat back on the bench, still clutching the doll. For a long moment she didn't say anything. She just held it. Then, in a voice so quiet it nearly broke him, she said, "She's the most beautiful thing I've ever had." Jackson swallowed hard. "What are you going to name her?" he asked. Lily smiled. "I think Luna's perfect." Then she looked at him, really looked, and said, "Are you my friend now?" The question hit him like a freight train. "If you want me to be," he said. "I do," she answered without hesitation. "You're my first grown-up friend ever." And just like that, Jackson Reed, millionaire investor hotel king, felt something shift in his heart. Because friendship, it turned out, had nothing to do with age, and everything to do with showing up. The next day, Jackson found himself back at Carter Elementary during lunch hour, parked in the same spot watching children spill into the yard. But this time, he wasn't just observing. He was looking for someone specific, and there she was. Lily, sitting under the big oak tree at the far corner of the playground, legs crossed, her new doll, Luna, cradled gently in her lap, as she talked to her softly. It was a scene that made him both smile and ache. He walked over quietly. "Hey, Lily." She turned quickly, her face brightening. "Jackson." Then she turned to the doll. "See, I told you he'd come back." Jackson grinned and took a seat beside her on the grass. "How's Luna doing?" "She loves it here. We had story time today, and I told her all about you." He noticed something then. All the other children had lunch boxes, sandwiches, juice boxes, little bags of chips. But Lily had nothing, not even a napkin. "Hey, did you forget your lunch today?" he asked gently. Lily's fingers fidgeted with Luna's sleeve. "No, we just didn't have anything at home this morning. But it's okay. I'll eat something later. Maybe." Jackson's heart tightened. "Lily," he said carefully, "how about we go get something right now? You, me, and Luna." Her eyes lit up, then dimmed almost as quickly. "But I'm not supposed to leave during school." "I already spoke with the office," he fibbed quickly. "They said it's fine. Just a short lunch. We'll be back before anyone misses you." Lily turned to Luna. "What do you think?" She waited a second, then nodded. "Luna says it's a great idea." Jackson chuckled. "Well, then it's settled." They walked down the block together, one suited businessman and one tiny girl in snow boots and a purple coat, talking like old friends. Jackson pointed out buildings he remembered from when he was her age, and Lily told him about her favorite storybooks and how Luna loved chocolate cake. Then she stopped in front of a small bakery, its window fogged with warmth and filled with cakes, cookies, and fresh bread. "It smells like heaven," she whispered. Inside, they found a booth by the window. Jackson ordered her a ham and cheese sandwich with warm tomato soup and a glass of orange juice. "And one juice for Luna, too," he told the waitress with a wink. Lily's eyes sparkled. As she ate, she spoke between bites. "When I grow up," she said, "I want to open a restaurant. Not a fancy one, but a warm one." Jackson leaned in. "What kind of food will you serve?" "Everything. Pizza, cake, noodles, and hot soup for cold days." "That sounds amazing." She nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "And if people can't pay, they can still eat. I'll just give it to them. Like if they're hungry and sad like my dad, they won't go hungry." Jackson blinked. Because Lily continued, "No one should ever be hungry just because they're poor. That's not fair." There it was again. The quiet truth of a child's wisdom, as simple and profound as anything he'd ever heard in a boardroom. He looked at her, then really looked. This little girl with a big dream who had already known more sadness than most adults. And he made another silent promise. He wouldn't just help her survive. He'd help her dream. It was Saturday afternoon when Jackson pulled into the modest cul-de-sac at the edge of town. The sun hung low in a pale sky, casting long golden shadows over the quiet neighborhood. He double-checked the address Lily had given him, hand-printed in crayon on a scrap of notebook paper, and parked in front of a small white house with chipped paint, a crooked mailbox, and flower pots made from old coffee cans lining the porch steps. He took a breath, grabbed the chocolate chip cookies he brought along, and walked up to the door. Before he could knock, it opened. Jackson Lily beamed, holding Luna in one arm and pulling the door wide with the other. "You're here? I told you I would be," he said warmly. From behind her, a young woman appeared, wearing a faded sweater and a welcoming smile that barely masked the exhaustion in her eyes. "You must be Jackson," she said. "I'm Claire. Lily talks about you non-stop." "It's nice to finally meet you," Jackson replied. "These are for you." "Oh," she said, surprised, taking the cookies. "Thank you. Come on in." The living room was small but clean, filled with signs of love. Hand-drawn pictures taped to the wall, a mismatched couch with a knitted blanket, and the scent of something warm on the stove. A man stepped out of the kitchen. He was tall, with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. "Ethan," he said, shaking Jackson's hand firmly. "Appreciate you coming." Lily gave Jackson a grand tour of the house, showing him Luna's bed, a shoebox lined with a washcloth, her sticker collection, and her favorite hiding spot behind the armchair. Claire poured coffee. Ethan joined them at the table. "So," Ethan said, breaking the brief silence, "Jackson, what do you do for work?" Jackson hesitated. "I own a few hotels," he said carefully. Ethan nodded. "Used to work at the old mill on Greenridge. 15 years. They shut it down last fall. Said the land was sold, bought out by some big company building a hotel." Jackson felt the breath leave his chest. What hotel, he asked, already fearing the answer. "They're calling it the Crescent." Ethan replied, "Luxury place, groundbreakings next month." Jackson's fingers gripped the mug tighter. He knew the Crescent. He'd signed the papers himself. He was the buyer. That land, the one that displaced 120 workers, including the man sitting across from him, was part of his expansion plan. A silence fell over the table, not awkward but heavy, as if the air itself realized the weight of the coincidence. Jackson cleared his throat. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." Ethan smiled politely, unaware. "Not your fault. Just the way things are now. Big money pushes out the rest of us." Jackson's mind raced. He's not angry because he doesn't know. He has no idea who I am. Claire got up to check the oven. Lily was humming softly on the floor, brushing Luna's hair. "I've been looking for work," Ethan continued. "No luck yet. Lily keeps me going, though." Jackson stared at the man who had lost everything because of a line on a spreadsheet. A man who was kind, gentle, and completely unaware that the person who changed his life was sitting in his kitchen. He wanted to say something. He wanted to come clean. But Lily laughed just then, a burst of joy that broke through the weight in the room. And Jackson looked at her and knew this wasn't the time, not yet, but it would come, because the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. And when it came out, he'd have to face it. Jackson barely remembered the drive home. The laughter from Lily's living room echoed in his ears, mingled with Ethan's quiet resilience and Claire's kind hospitality. They had welcomed him in, offered him coffee, a seat at their table, smiles as if he belonged there. But all he could feel now was guilt, bone-deep, chest-crushing guilt. Because while they made space for him in their home, he had unknowingly torn theirs apart. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. He paced the floors of his sleek glass-walled home, the silence no longer peaceful, but accusatory. The Crescent, the name now sounded bitter, clinical. It was supposed to be another win, another jewel in the empire, a sleek boutique hotel in a redeveloping area, the pitch deck had said. Underutilized real estate with high upside. No one had mentioned the factory. No one had mentioned Ethan, and Jackson never asked. He thought of Ethan taking a bus across town every morning to a job he gave everything to, of Claire stretching every dollar to feed their daughter, of Lily pretending she got a gift for Christmas because she didn't want to be different. He thought of the patch on the curtain in their living room, the crack in the teacup Claire used without apology, the hole in Ethan's work boots neatly placed by the door. And he had done this. He, Jackson Reed, the boy who once hated being invisible, had become the kind of man who erased people's lives without even knowing their names. He sat down at his desk, head in his hands. What had he become? He'd built a business on efficiency, on clean numbers and faster growth. But behind every redevelopment, every closure, were families, people, children who went to bed hungry because someone like him had needed a bigger return. His eyes wandered to the photo frame beside him. It was the picture of Lily from yesterday, hugging Luna on the bench, sunlight hitting her hair like a halo. Her smile had been genuine, because of him. But that smile came from a lie, and a truth that would soon come to light. He thought of what would happen when Ethan found out, when Claire learned that the man her daughter adored had been the architect of their hardship. Would they hate him? Would Lily? He whispered her words aloud bitterly. "Are you my friend now?" Yes. Yes, he was. And that's why it had to change. That night, Jackson opened his laptop. He pulled up the Crescent project files, permits, contractor timelines, architect drafts. It was all there, sterile and unstoppable. Until now, he stared at the screen. Then, with one deliberate breath, he opened a new email. Subject urgent, project termination. To Legal Team Development PR. He didn't know the fallout yet, didn't care. Because this was no longer about property, this was about people. And Jackson Reed was done pretending they were just numbers. Jackson stood in front of the white-paneled house with the coffee can flower pots once more. But this time, his hands were shaking. In them he held no doll, no cookies, no cheerful excuse. Just the truth. And it was heavier than anything he'd ever carried. The door opened before he could knock. Lily, of course. "Jackson," she squealed, throwing her arms around his waist. "Luna missed you." He forced a smile. "I missed you both, too." Claire appeared behind her, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Come on in. We were just making dinner." Jackson stepped inside slowly, his heart pounding louder with every footstep. Ethan was already at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples and looking tired but hopeful. "Hey there," he said. "Good timing. We're having spaghetti. Lily's pick." Jackson smiled weakly. "Smells amazing." He sat down with them, trying to act natural, but the words were already pressing against his chest like a tide. It couldn't wait. "Claire, Ethan," he began, his voice low and trembling. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said days ago." They both looked up, sensing the shift. Lily, meanwhile, sat on the floor by the couch, brushing Luna's hair and humming softly. Jackson continued, "Last week when I came here, Ethan told me about the factory, about losing your job, and how the land was bought for a hotel." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, what about it?" Jackson swallowed hard. "That hotel, the Crescent, it was mine." The room went still. "I bought the land. I didn't know about the factory until I met Lily. I didn't know about any of it. It was just a name on a file, a redevelopment deal. I never saw the people it would affect." Claire's hand froze mid-stir at the stove. Ethan sat up straighter, the calm draining from his face. "You're the reason I lost my job," Ethan asked, voice sharp now. "The reason 120 people had to scramble to feed their families." Jackson couldn't meet his eyes. "Yes, and I'm sorry. I came here thinking I was helping a school, dropping off a donation, doing some good. But instead, I found out I'd hurt people like you, and I didn't even know it." Claire slowly lowered the spoon into the pot. Her eyes brimmed, but she said nothing. "I canceled the project," Jackson said quickly. "The hotel's done. I pulled the plug. I'm not building anything there." Silence. "You canceled it," Ethan repeated, disbelief etched across his face. Jackson nodded. "I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I'm going to do something better with that land. Something for the people who lost everything." Lily looked up from the floor, sensing something serious. She stood doll in hand and walked over to Jackson. "Does this mean," she began slowly, "that you can help my daddy get his job back?" Her voice was so earnest, so innocent, that it shattered whatever was left of his composure. "I'm going to try Lily," he whispered, "with everything I've got." Ethan looked at Jackson, really looked, as if trying to read the sincerity behind the confession. Claire stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on her husband's arm. "Why did you come back?" Ethan asked finally. "Because I couldn't keep being the man who caused the pain," and then walked away. A long pause stretched between them. The air was thick but not hostile, just heavy with the weight of truth. And for the first time, Jackson didn't try to escape it. The next morning, Jackson was in his office by 6 a.m., not reviewing profit reports or site maps, but sketching on a yellow notepad with the urgency of someone whose heart had finally outrun his spreadsheets. The word at the top of the page, cooperative. By noon, he had canceled every meeting on his calendar. His executive assistant was baffled. His legal team was concerned. His head of development nearly quit on the spot. Mr. Reed, one of his lawyers, insisted over speakerphone, You're throwing away a multi-million-dollar opportunity. Investors will revolt. I'm not throwing it away, Jackson said calmly. I'm repurposing it. For what? A community center. Not just a center. A place where the people I displaced can rebuild what I helped tear down. He hung up. That afternoon, he made a call to Ethan. They met at a quiet diner across town, the kind with vinyl booths and chipped mugs that always smelled faintly of maple syrup. Jackson slid into the seat across from him, carrying a folder. No preamble, no polished pitch. I have a proposal, he said. Ethan crossed his arms but listened. I want to transform the old factory into something for the workers who lost everything. A cooperative, community-owned, community-run. Everyone who wants to come back gets a voice, a share, a job. Ethan blinked. Why me? Because you know those people. You worked beside them for 15 years. I need someone who understands what they need. Someone they trust. Ethan didn't respond right away. Jackson pressed on. I'll fund everything. The renovation, the equipment, the startup costs. No strings. I don't want ownership. Just a chance to do right. Ethan finally spoke. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. There was a long pause. Then Ethan leaned back. You'll need a lot more than just me. They don't trust you, Jackson. Not after what happened. I know, but I'm not asking them to trust me. I'm asking them to help build something better than what we all lost. Over the next week, Ethan helped Jackson reach out to his old co-workers. They booked a room at the local community center and held the first meeting. Jackson stood awkwardly in front of a room full of skeptical eyes. Men and women who'd given decades to the factory. Some nodded, most crossed their arms. I'm not here to erase the past, Jackson began. I'm here because I finally see what I ignored. The people behind the paper. I know an apology isn't enough, but maybe a second chance is. Grumbles, murmurs, doubt. Until Claire stood up from the back holding a folder of notes. I've been thinking, she said. If there's going to be a kitchen, I'd like to run it. I've always wanted to cook for more than just my family. Her voice turned the tide. Soon others followed. A seamstress who wanted to run a workshop, a retired foreman who offered to train new hires, a woman who suggested childcare on-site for working moms. Ideas bloomed like spring flowers. And Jackson didn't speak much after that. He just listened, because for the first time, the people who mattered most were being heard. And the real rebuilding had begun. The first hammer hit the rusted metal door of the old Green Ridge factory on a crisp Monday morning. And from that moment, the past began to transform. Jackson was there, not in a suit or with a clipboard, but in jeans boots and a flannel shirt. He rolled up his sleeves, unloaded supplies, and swept out debris alongside the rest of them. The men and women who'd once filed into the factory for shifts were now returning, not as employees but as builders of something new. They called it Bright Start Cooperative. Ethan oversaw the maintenance team. He organized schedules, set up safety zones, and coordinated volunteers. Claire was in charge of kitchen plans and took it seriously, showing up with folders full of recipes, budget breakdowns, and diagrams of the ideal cooking space. Jackson stepped back and let them lead. He was there, but not in charge. And that made all the difference. Word spread, people who'd lost faith showed up out of curiosity, and stayed because of hope. Families came on weekends to help paint walls. Teenagers hauled scrap metal. Kids played in the courtyard as their parents worked, their laughter echoing through hallways once filled with machines. Even Lily came, almost every Saturday. She walked the halls with Luna in one hand and a clipboard in the other, inspecting progress. Plants should go in all the corners, she told Jackson one day. Plants make places happy. He chuckled and wrote it down. And sure enough, by the next week, every room had a potted plant, donated or grown by the community. They converted the old cafeteria into Claire's dream kitchen, professional ovens, prep stations, industrial refrigerators. The loading dock became a bakery run by 2 former mill workers with family bread recipes. The sewing wing was lined with tables thread and vintage machines. The old break room transformed into a daycare and reading corner. Bright rugs, toy shelves, and hand-painted murals made by local artists. And in a large open workshop, Ethan and 2 retired welders began teaching basic trades to young people. Maintenance repairs, even welding 101. Jackson watched it all take shape with quiet wonder. One afternoon, as he was helping move a shelf, a voice called behind him. Mr. Jackson. He turned to find Lily standing proudly with a clipboard and a smudge of paint on her cheek. I made a list, she said. A list, of all the things Bright Start needs to be the best place ever. She handed it over. At the top was a cake every Friday, more storybooks, a flower garden outside, a spot where people can just sit and talk. Jackson read every word, his heart full. Consider it done, he said. By the end of the third month, Bright Start didn't look like a repurposed factory anymore. It looked like hope, painted in soft blues and yellows, filled with laughter, conversation, and purpose. People weren't just earning a wage again. They were healing. And every person knew this wasn't built for them. It was built with them, by hands that had once been forgotten, and a little girl who had once believed she'd been left behind. The morning of the grand opening arrived with a cool spring breeze and a sky so clear it felt symbolic, as if the weather itself understood the importance of the day. Rows of folding chairs lined the freshly paved courtyard, outside the old factory now glowing with fresh paint and handmade signage that read in bold, cheerful letters, Bright Start Cooperative, built by us for us. Dozens of families arrived early. Former factory workers dressed in button-ups and blouses helped set up tables. Volunteers from the community brought trays of homemade food. Kids darted through the crowd with streamers and balloons, laughter floating in the air like music. Jackson stood near the entrance tie, askew nervously straightening a stack of printed brochures. He wasn't used to this kind of nervous. He'd launched hotels with red carpets and ribbon cuttings, but this was different, because this wasn't his launch. This was theirs. Ethan arrived first, adjusting the mic stand near the makeshift stage. Claire followed, balancing 2 trays of pastries, the bakery's opening day offerings, while giving last-minute instructions to a trio of young volunteers. Then, just before the ceremony began, came Lily. She walked across the courtyard in a powder blue dress Claire had sewn for the occasion, embroidered with tiny sunflowers. In her arms was Luna, also dressed to match. Her red curls bounced as she skipped toward Jackson. "Can we see everything again before it starts?" she asked, eyes wide with excitement. Of course he smiled. He took her on a quick tour, the community kitchen bustling with trays of cornbread and casseroles, the sewing room alive with the whir of fabric being trimmed for uniforms, the daycare filled with colorful storybooks and nap mats. In each space, Lily stopped to point out her favorite part. When they returned to the courtyard, the small stage was already set. Folding chairs were filled. Local press had arrived. Even the mayor stood off to the side. Ethan took the mic and welcomed the crowd, voice steady but thick with emotion. "This place used to echo with machines," he said. "Now it echoes with voices, laughter, purpose. That's what Bright Start is, a second chance." Claire stepped up next. She shared how the community kitchen would offer daily meals at pay-what-you-can prices, with free plates reserved for anyone who needed one. "No one," she said, "will ever leave here hungry." Others spoke. Teachers, former employees, volunteers. Then something unexpected happened. Lily tugged on Jackson's sleeve. "Can I say something?" He blinked. "You want to speak?" She nodded firmly. "It's important." He hesitated for just a second, then led her to the stage. She climbed up, small hands gripping the mic, and looked out at the crowd with the poise of someone far beyond her years. "Hi," she said, voice ringing clear and confident. "My name's Lily. I just wanted to say thank you. To my friend Jackson, and to everyone who built this." She paused, glancing at Luna for courage, then added, "Jackson turned a sad place into a happy one. And now my daddy has a job again. And mommy smiles more. And Luna has a lot of friends." Laughter rippled through the crowd, then silence. Lily looked straight at Jackson. "You listened to my heart," she said. And there it was. The truest line of the day. Jackson stepped up, slowly took the mic with shaking hands. "I thought I came here to give," he said, voice catching. "But Lily gave me something I didn't know I needed, a reason, a new beginning." He gestured behind him. This place, it was inspired by a dream. A little girl's dream about feeding people, about not leaving anyone behind. Bright Start is her dream. And now, it's ours. The applause was thunderous. But for Jackson, all he heard was Lily's quiet whisper as she hugged Luna tight. "I told you this would be a happy place." And it was. From that day on, Jackson's weekends took on an entirely new rhythm. Every Friday after work, he'd drive not to his penthouse suite or boardroom retreat, but to the quiet little white house with the crooked mailbox and the flower pots out front. Lily's home. At first he brought cupcakes, then board games, then books he remembered loving as a child. But soon he realized he didn't need to bring anything except himself, because what they gave him in return was more than enough. Saturday mornings were for adventures, sometimes to the farmer's market, other times to the Bright Start Cooperative to check on Luna's bakery, as Lily proudly called it. She'd twirl around the kitchen in her apron, offering taste tests and official critiques of Claire's newest recipes. Claire had found her calling. She ran the community kitchen with equal parts grace and grit, creating menus that fed the stomach and soul. Her eyes shone differently now, not tired, but alive, fulfilled. Ethan, too, had transformed. He led maintenance at the cooperative with quiet strength, mentoring younger men and fixing what others discarded. He no longer walked with the weight of failure, but the confidence of purpose. And Jackson. He found something he hadn't realized he was missing: belonging. Sunday afternoons became sacred. Family day, Lily called it. They'd bake cakes from scratch, often experimenting with wild ingredients like cinnamon in carrot cake or crushed pretzels in brownies. Jackson learned to measure flour with his elbows tucked per Claire's instructions and not to open the oven too early, per Lily's firm orders. After baking came porch time. Claire would sit with a cup of tea smiling as she listened to Lily's latest school story. Ethan and Jackson would play cards often, letting Lily sneak a few rounds in, even though she somehow always won. One particular Sunday, the breeze was cool, the sun just beginning to dip behind the trees. Lily curled up next to Jackson on the porch swing, Luna in her lap, a blanket wrapped around them both. She didn't say much, just rested her head against his side and whispered, "You're part of our family now. We just haven't figured out your title yet." Jackson didn't respond right away. His throat felt tight. From the kitchen window, Claire paused in drying a plate and looked out, her eyes soft. Ethan watched from the doorway, a knowing smile forming. It was in that silence, that golden glowing pause, that Jackson felt something he hadn't in years. He wasn't an outsider peeking into someone else's joy. He was inside it. He belonged here, not because of his money or his generosity, but because he had chosen them, and they had chosen him right back. Lily looked up at him again, this time grinning. "I think you're Uncle Jackson now." He laughed. "Uncle Jackson it is." She nodded solemnly as if sealing a very official family appointment. And just like that, the titles didn't matter anymore. Because family, they all knew, wasn't about blood. It was about who stayed, who listened, who showed up. And Jackson had, fully, completely, without looking back. 6 months passed like petals in the wind, each one filled with small, beautiful moments that stitched themselves into a life Jackson never expected to love this much. Bright Start Cooperative wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The bakery opened at dawn, filling the neighborhood with the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls. Claire's kitchen served dozens of meals a day, and every child who walked in left with a full belly and a second helping for later. Ethan's workshop had grown into a full-blown training center, helping teenagers and adults gain real-world skills. People who had once felt discarded now taught others how to build, repair, and restore. Jackson visited every week, not out of duty, but because he couldn't imagine not being there. He wasn't Mr. Reed anymore. He was Uncle Jackson, the guy who helped paint the new children's reading room, who carried trays for Claire when she was short-staffed, and who still let Lily beat him in Go Fish every Sunday. The cooperative had become a magnet, drawing people in, not with flashy ads, but with warmth, inclusion, and something even rarer, dignity. One Friday afternoon, Jackson walked into Bright Start holding a small potted plant, a blooming yellow marigold. He placed it in the daycare window, where sunlight hit just right. A little boy looked up at him. "Why are you putting flowers everywhere?" Jackson smiled. "Because a very smart girl once told me that plants make places happy." That evening, he joined the family for their usual Sunday porch time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in swirls of orange and lavender. Lily, now missing her 2 front teeth, cuddled up beside him, holding Luna, who sported a few patches lovingly sewn by Claire. Claire came out with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. Ethan followed, carrying a radio tuned to oldies. They all sat together, swaying gently on the porch swing. The air was quiet but full, the kind of silence you only get when your heart is completely still and completely full. Lily looked up, blinking slowly. "You know Uncle Jackson, Bright Start is kind of like my restaurant idea. He looked down at her and smiled. You're right. Only bigger. And with more cake. He chuckled. Definitely more cake. She paused, then whispered, Thanks for listening to me that day at school. Jackson turned to face her fully. Thank you for speaking, because that was the truth. It had all started because one little girl sitting alone on school steps with no Christmas present had dared to say the words most grown-ups were too afraid to. Words about hunger, sadness, hope. And Jackson, a man with all the money in the world and none of the warmth, had finally stopped long enough to listen. And in doing so, he hadn't just changed her life. She had changed his. In a world often ruled by numbers, noise, and the next big deal, this story reminds us that the greatest transformations begin in the quietest of moments, like a child's whisper on a cold school step. Jackson Reed walked into Carter Elementary, thinking he was the one offering help. He had a check in hand, a name that opened doors, and a reputation built on results. But what he received in return was far more powerful a lesson in presence, in empathy, in listening, really listening to the small voice no one else had noticed. Lily didn't ask for toys. She didn't beg for favors. She simply told her truth, clear, raw, and honest. I didn't get a Christmas present. And in that sentence, she cracked open a man's heart that had long been walled off by success and solitude. Because what Lily truly offered wasn't a problem to solve. She offered him a chance to remember who he was before the suits, before the spreadsheets. A boy who once understood what it felt like to be forgotten. And that was the miracle. Not just a doll in a box or a canceled hotel, but the birth of something bigger. A community rebuilt, a family found, and a man redeemed not by guilt, but by grace. In Lily's eyes, Jackson discovered a reflection of his younger self, one that didn't need more wealth, just one act of kindness. And for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't chasing growth returns or praise. He was rooted, chosen, loved, all because a little girl believed that even buttered noodles could feel like Christmas if someone cared enough to sit with you at the table. So, if you've ever wondered what it takes to change the world, sometimes it starts with simply showing up and choosing to stay